So before we get into coding our linked list, there are a couple of important concepts that we need to go over to make sure we fully understand what we are going to be doing. The first concept that we need to cover is the JavaScript constructor function, because we are going to be building our linked list with a constructor function, and all of the nodes in our linked list with their own constructor function. To explore constructor functions, we are going to use the Google Chrome console. If you don't have Google Chrome, don't worry. It is not necessary for this course, and you can just follow along with me in this video. So let's open a window of Chrome. Then to open the console, you can simply press Command, Option, and J. Or you can click up on this menu button, go to More Tools, and click Developer Tools. That will open the console for you. Just make sure that it is on the right tab. Now, what is a constructor function and what does it do? Well, a constructor function is simply a function that creates an object class and allows you to create multiple instances of that class very easily. What this means is that they allow you to create a lot of objects very quickly, and these objects will all have the same properties and the same functionality because they are all part of the same class. Now, that might be a little bit confusing when you first hear it, but let's get into an example to see what all of that really means. So let's take a real-life example. Let's think about Facebook for a minute. Facebook has over 1.5 billion users, and these users are all objects of the same class, and they have the same properties like name, email, password, birthday, etc. We are going to pretend for a minute that we are building out the Facebook website, and we want to make a bunch of different users. Let's do this by creating a user constructor function. This constructor function will allow us to create multiple users, or user objects, that all have the same properties and functionality. The code to create this user constructor function is as follows. We will write a function called user, and notice the capital U here. We write our constructor functions like this simply because it is a best practice to do so, and it signifies that this is a constructor function and not just a regular function. Inside of the parentheses, we will pass in any properties that we want each of our user objects to have. In this case, we are going to pass in first name, last name, age, and gender, because we want all of our user objects to have a first name, last name, age, and a gender. We then assign these parameters to our user objects using the this keyword. We will say that the first name property on our object will equal the first name parameter that is passed into the function. And the same thing goes for our other properties. We will say this dot last name equals the last name parameter passed in. This dot age equals the age parameter passed in. And this dot gender equals the gender parameter passed in. And that is it. That is our constructor function. Now, you might be wondering what we just did and what the this keyword is all about. Well, we are going to be using this constructor function to create a lot of user objects, and the this keyword is simply referring to each of those user objects. Now, that might sound like kind of a mouthful right now, but let's run through a couple of examples, and I'm sure that we will understand it a lot better. So let's finally use our user constructor function to make some user objects, or user instances, as we call them. The first user we are going to make is going to be called, very simply, user1. We will say variable user1 equals a new user. And we will say that user1 has a first name of John, a last name of Smith, an age of 26, and a gender of male. Notice that we use the new keyword to invoke our constructor function and make a user object. That's how we get our constructor function to work. Now we press enter and user1 is in the system. If we type out user1, we can see what we just created. Okay, cool. So we can see that user1 is an object of the class user, which is shown right here. And we can see that he also has a first name of John, a last name of Smith, an age of 26, and a gender of male, because those are the parameters that we passed into the constructor function. Let's do one more example. We will create our next user called user200. So we will say variable user200 equals a new user. And we will pass in the properties that we want her to have. We will say that she has a first name of Jill, and we pass that in first because first name is the first parameter that we passed in when we created our constructor function up here. We will say that she has a last name of Robinson, an age of 25, and she has a gender of female. We hit enter and she's now in the system. Now we type in user200 to see what we get. And we can see that user200 is an object of the class user, just like user1, and she has a first name of Jill, a last name of Robinson, an age of 25, and a gender of female, because those are the parameters that we passed into our constructor function. Now, you might be wondering how all of these properties got assigned correctly, and that brings us back to the this keyword that we mentioned earlier. When we created our constructor function, we used the this keyword to assign the properties. When it comes to constructor functions, the this keyword, like all of these right here, it does not refer to the function that it is in this case the user function. It does not refer to this function, but instead this refers to the object that will be created by the constructor function. So it is saying, if I use this constructor function to create an object, make sure that the properties on the object are first name, last name, age, and gender, in this case, or whatever you want them to be when you create your constructor function. Then I am saying, set the first name property equal to the first name parameter that is passed in. Set the last name property equal to the last name parameter that is passed in, and so on. And that is it. That is how a constructor function works, and the role that the this keyword plays in a constructor function. When we get to finally, we are going to make two constructor functions. One constructor function for our linked list, and one constructor function for our nodes that will be inside of our linked list. And if you're still a little fuzzy on exactly how all of this is working, don't worry. We will be spending a lot of time with these concepts, so they will become more clear as we move on.